All right, so just a bit of sharing before we begin to invite Prof. Osman to share about today's topic. Wujud initiative started off more than 7 years ago by a group of curious youths who couldn't rationalize the constant antagonism between Muslims and the community. So determined to find the right, quote unquote, answers, this long journey towards the truth, quote unquote, we voyaged together and promised to practice restraint, deliberation, patience, and humility towards one another. And it was then named Voyage of Knowledge series. Now it's called the Wujud Initiative, and the team is committed. The team is committed and relentless in the pursuit of knowledge to fulfill curious minds and find better ways to live, discuss, and grow with one another. And we will have more series coming up with regards to many different topics. But for now, we will kick off with the environmental topic that is ever so timely, right? So that's a bit about Wujud Initiative. I would probably pass back to Safia, our moderator, to continue the discussion. Thank you.
Okay, Assalamualaikum everyone. So I'll be moderating today's session. I am Safia from Fitri. Before I introduce Dr. Osman Bakar, maybe I'll just introduce a bit
Recording
more about
in
Fitri.
progress.
Okay. I'll be talking about what Fitri is and how this initiative came about. So Fitri is a Singapore-based environmental Islamic group, and with the hopes of inspiring the Khalifa fil ard in us and growing a community that is in alignment with Islamic principles. So it was founded in 2013, and we have been doing work on the ground over the past years, and we are looking to grow as well. So among our intentions to grow is towards building a more intellectual, rigorous environment for us to grow in this environmental space. Also because we are constantly bombarded with issues of modern man and stuff like that. So now I will introduce Professor Osman Bakar. We are very honored to have him here with us today. So Professor Osman Bakar is currently Al-Ghazali Chair of Islamic Thought at ISTAC, International Islamic University, Malaysia, and Emeritus Professor of Philosophy of Science at the University of Malaya. He was formerly Distinguished Professor of Sultan Omar Ali Saifuddin Center of Islamic Studies, SOAS CIS, and University Brunei Darussalam and Malaysia Chair of Southeast Asian Islam at the Prince Al Walid bin Talal Center for Muslim Christian Understanding in Georgetown University, Washington, DC. And Dr. Baka is also author and editor of 38 books and numerous articles on various aspects of Islamic thought and civilization, particularly Islamic science and philosophy and interreligious and intercivilizational dialogue. His writings have been translated into many languages, and he has served as advisor and consultant to a variety of international academic and professional organizations, including UNESCO, the Qatar Foundation, and the European Sounds Foundation. He was awarded a doctorship as well by the Malaysian King in the year 2000. So we're really honored to have you here, Dr. Osman Bakar, and we're excited for you to share with us about your book on environmental wisdom. So I guess we can just start the meeting. Feel free to switch on your cameras as well. We are hoping for this session to be interactive. We are opening questions to the floor as well later on. So the first 45, just to break down the structure of today's session, it will be the first session of a series. So it will be conducted there will be several sessions in the series. And so it will be 45 minutes of Dr. Usman sharing about the book and just opening up the session, giving some context. And then the next 45 minutes we'll take questions and So Professor Usman, would you like to just maybe how are you doing today, by the way?
Alhamdulillah, fine. I mean, I hope we can have a good discussion, especially this interactive thing. Okay, so let's see. Yeah.
Okay.
So you want me to proceed now?
Yes, inshallah, we can just
All right.
dive into
Thank you, Sister Safia, and to Brother Helmi, the two people who, two of the group in the group who are, I would say, who have been working very hard to carry out, to implement this plan, this series of lectures. Okay, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. To all viewers, thank you. First of all, I would like to congratulate the co-organizers of this series of discussions on the environment, on environmental wisdom, namely, for short, the Wujud and Fitri, the two co-organizers based in Singapore, and the ABIM, co-sponsoring the program, and I'm sure many of the viewers are familiar with my thoughts on the environment. But as discussed earlier between me and Brother Ilmi, we would like to see this program to be interactive in nature, so I'm not going to spend too much on talking, but I would like basically to discuss problems. But congratulations to the organizers, because I see this as an initiative by the younger generation. I belong to older generation who has different experience on the environment compared to what you are experiencing, because nature, the world of nature has changed so much drastically, not in the positive sense, but in the negative sense. I know that the core concern of this series of discussions is my book, my latest book, the Environmental Wisdom for Planet Earth, the Islamic Heritage. I'm sure also, as I can see that now there are viewers from outside the region, outside Southeast Asia, from other countries. So in other words, the topic is shared. The interest in the topic is shared by people from all over the world, the globe. So since this is not the only lecture or discussion that we are going to have, I would like really to start from something very fundamental, and before we go into the details on the question of environmental wisdom. First to talk about the problems, what has been happening. So I just want to allow me to share the screen. I don't have a detailed slides like in previous cases, because as I said, this is interactive, but I just jot some fundamental points that I would like to take up because this provides the background in the sense. So what I wish to do now is to provide the background for the problems that we have regarding environment and why we need to go back, to return to that wisdom, that traditional wisdom, which is found in all traditions. But this traditional wisdom has been marginalized and just simply ignored by people today who are driven by greed, by excessive profits, excessive materialism at the expense of the environment. But the situation is such that the situation is real bad. The situation is real bad. So that phrase, this climate change, global warming, these are all, in sense, manifestations, inevitable manifestations that happen because of what we have been doing to our planet Earth. And why we are doing all this? Because we have lost control of ourselves. So this basically, I just want to discuss a few things. Okay, can you hear me? All right. So I call this particular discussion now Islamic Conception of Nature. My focus is on Islamic conception of nature, but since Islamic conception of nature is universal in nature, so people who belong to other traditions, whether they happen to be here or not, I mean, they can find equivalence. They can find equivalence in their own religious tradition, in their spiritual tradition, for example. So, okay, if I can do that today to explain the Islamic conception of nature, all right, I think I'll be happy. But in order to discuss that, put that in the context. First, the roots of environmental disorder. We all know that this is a fact. We are seeing environmental disorder. What a change, because as the Quran emphasized, the world of nature was in order, not disorder. That's why for example, Muslim philosophers refer to this what called the natural order. The world of nature is in proper order, and that order, the laws of nature, the laws that govern relationships between things in nature, are due to the and there's a metaphysical cause for that. There is that metaphysical cause is, of course, in the Islamic context, is none other than Allah, God. Yeah? Allah is the cause of the natural order, and we have disorder because of certain things that, of certain reasons and factors, which I would like to explain to you. But just to realize that, in other words, the world of nature was not in disorder all the time, all this while. No? The world of nature is in order. It is for us human beings to find out this order, and that's why scientists, natural scientists, all right? And for example, this has been the case not only in the modern time, but in various ages, various eras, including during the Islamic period. Scientists look at nature as something in order, balance, harmony, and their mind was directed towards discovering these fundamental characteristics of the world of nature. But in the modern world, for a number of reasons, we have disorder, and we need to understand the roots, not just one root, but several roots, the roots of the environmental disorder. I would recommend, of course, the book of my own teacher, Syed Hossein Nasser, who is still alive, who is still teaching, in fact, at the university, George Washington University. His book, Man and Nature. So that was published in 1968. 1968. And the book is still of great value. I have not come as a new book that has been able to replace this Nasser's book, because Nasser's books go into the very, very fundamental teachings about nature. So, and the roots, in fact, in one chapter of the book, he explained the roots, basically meaning the intellectual roots of the current environmental disorder. So I think we need to sink into our mind about this thing. Even this is not something which is already done, which is already, it doesn't need any more discussion. No, this should be an ongoing thing. We should always remind ourselves of this natural order, but this thing that we call nature. So that's why I argue let's really understand the Islamic conception of nature, because part of the in fact is the root of the environmental disorder is because of our misconception of nature. So I advise you to get a copy of that book, or those want to read in Bahasa, in Malay. To tell you, this book has been translated by my good friend. The book, is published by one new publisher in Malaysia, and I have given a long forward to the Malay translation of this book. I'm sorry, I forgot just now the book. Give me the book. I'll get the book to show you on the roots of this environmental disorder. All right. So this is the first thing that I would like to take to get your attention. To understand the roots, in order to understand the roots, we have to go into history, and that history means to understand why did modern science and modern technology come into the picture? Why have this happened? Of course, not everybody has the time to go to the roots, to study. But some of you, some of us, I'm referring to the younger generation, for example, should study in greater details about the state of mind. What state of mind that these founders, the founders of modern science had, that did letter to the, in a sense, to the control of nature, what they call the conquest of nature. When I was young, still in schools, the popular word in the West, in our country even, was the use of the word conquest of nature. Today, of course, that word is heavily criticized by those who are talking about this natural order, environmental, the health, and so on. Precisely because because that word conquest of nature implies something. It's something against the very concept of harmony. Certainly, in traditional civilizations before the modern period, people don't look at nature as something to be conquered. So therefore, it is only an experience of small segment of humanity who have been concerned with this conquest. But what happened later, it is that idea that prevailed, that dominated in the world. But now that people are aware of what we have done to the environment, we call, there are these environmentalist groups and lovers of nature and so on, who feel that we should remove that word from the vocabulary, from our vocabulary. Don't talk about conquest, because they are not enemies. Nature is not an enemy. Nature is something with which we should have harmonious relationship for various reasons, as we shall see soon, inshallah. Okay, that's the first point that I want to add. And I've got the book now. Can you see? I just want to show. All right. This book. So the title is there, Manusia dan Alam Tabi'i. Manusia dan Alam Tabi'i. Alam Tabi'i is the translation for nature. And I will show you later that the term Tabi'i, Alam Tabi'i, that is very, very important. And the subtitle is Kemalut Rohani, Manusia Modern. Ditulis oleh pengarang Syed Hussein Nasar. So you can get a copy of that. Now, yes, the translator is Dr. Khairul Anam, formerly a lecturer at the University of Malaya, but now has joined the private sector. Okay, let me go back to the slide. Yeah. All right. Here I just simplify the roots of this environmental disorder into two elements, basically. Modern man's misconception of nature, the microcosm, his environment. All right. In other words, the word nature here in English, I'm referring to what we call the microcosm, the nature that exists outside us, that is external to us, which of course is our natural environment, our biophysical environment, our physical environment. Yeah. So that is the first thing I would like to discuss a little bit. In other words, one main root of environmental disorder is modern man's misconception of nature. Why the word modern man? I'm using the word, in the sense used by Nusar and other people. Modern man here meaning that that particular human person who has embraced a certain worldview. In other words, certain fundamental ideas that had been cherished by the traditional world has been marginalized. For example, the concept of the question of heaven, right? If we look at the various legislation, it's always a question of the importance relationship between heaven and earth. Heaven and earth must go together. There is no nature, there's no earth without heaven. But the moment we forget heaven totally, then we begin to experience all the problems. Because as it is, because in nature, in reality, there is that very, very important relationship between heaven and earth, as you use the word in the Chinese traditions, in the Eastern traditions. Yeah. But in the case of the Abrahamic tradition, like Judaism, Christianity, Islam, this convergence, and we call that the relationship between God, the transcendent, and the planet and Earth, and Earth. So not only that, of course, subsequently, in other words, the question of the idea of nature as being, the world of nature as being alive, is rejected. Is nature alive or dead? Well, there are many modern scientists, for example, modern philosophers, modern thinkers, who view nature as an autonomous, as a closed domain. There's nothing beyond it. There's nothing beyond it. So nature is regarded as it, not something alive, but that is to be analyzed, to be conquered, to be exploited to the fullest extent possible. So that's the very important background. And so here I'm saying that microcosm, because basically you have microcosm, which is our own human being. We human beings are called microcosm, the small world, the miniature, the universe in miniature, in the sense that all that exists in the reality outside us exists in our being. Yeah. So in that sense, nature is part of us. Nature is part of our own being. So and that refers to us, microcosm. In the Islamic tradition, this is called the Al-Alam as-Saghir. Al-Alam as-Saghir, the small world. Now, so the first misconception of man, modern man, is about that microcosm. There's a long history, of course, that takes hundreds of 100 years in the West, in the views of people, how they look at the microcosm. The first thing that was removed them from the microcosm by people in the West was God. God was removed later, not in the beginning, but angels. The angel in the history of Western thought, angels were the first creatures to be erased from the memory, to be eradicated, to be expelled, whatever word you use, to be expelled. And when these few thinking people were spreading the argument, then we don't need the angels in order to understand how the universe functions. Of course, it's a great understanding from the Islamic point of view, from the Islamic view of Islamic angelology, the branch of knowledge dealing with angels. I mean, you can imagine, you can write books about the world of angels. And the world of angels in Islamic thought has always been connected to what is happening in the natural world, on life here on Earth. But that's what happened. So they appeared that moment that in Western history when the angels no longer. Yeah. And of course, what was happening, gradually what happened, in other words, the removal of other creatures, the intelligent creatures on Earth, and finally God. Yeah. So in the 19th century, then God has no meaning as far as how the world understands that everything can be explained from within. God is not needed as well. Yeah. So misconception of nature, there is the microcosm, misunderstanding of the world, nature that we see around us. Talking about the world of the minerals, plants, animals, human being, and the intelligences, the great intelligence beyond. Well, of course not. Partly thanks to artificial intelligence, people are talking again about the intelligences, and people are interested to find out are there more intelligent creatures than us. So the subject of intelligence is gaining, is regaining, in a sense, importance. But my point here is that how modern man understand nature, that is contributing to this environmental disorder. So in nature that is independent, or the world of nature as the only reality that exists. There's nothing beyond nature, which goes against the beliefs of many traditions. So how we look at animals, how we look at plants, it's of course based on certain beliefs. The understanding of nature is based on certain beliefs, which from the Islamic point of view are wrong. The views are wrong. Yeah? In the case of Islam, of course, it is not purely based on science, but also more importantly, it's based on revelation, the Quran. The Quran is a very important source of ideas about nature. The Quran looks at nature in a very different way from what modern science is viewing in terms of this world of nature. So I think it is very important especially for Muslims, who are supposed to be guided by the Quran, how to understand nature, because how we understand nature will influence our way of dealing with nature. If this is what is nature, then you have a certain way of dealing with nature. But if you have a different view about nature, you may have different ways of, you may have different attitudes towards nature. Yeah? So in other words, your attitudes, our attitudes towards nature are determined to a great extent by the kind of views we have about nature. So having the right conception of nature is a very, very important thing. Okay, so that's as far as I call a modern man's misconception of nature, but the word nature here referring to microcosm, that is the environment external to us, or the environment surrounding us. And talking about environment, we must ask from the Islamic point of view, the environment is multi-layered. Our nearest environment, that is the biophysical environment that we see with our physical eyes, that we experience physically. But beyond that, there is the larger environment, the subtle environment, non-physical reality. Then you have the angel surrounding that. And finally, God himself. The ultimate environment is God himself. It's from one of you. When we speak about God, the transcendent, means that God is the ultimate environment. And so it's not, environment does not consist of one level, but it's multi-layered environment. All this is in the Quran. One of the names of God, Muhit, and Muhit, that which surrounds us. So instead, based on the Quran, one of the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the environment itself. Allah is the ultimate environment. What we have, when we talk about environment, of course we are referring only to our biophysical environment. But there are other levels surrounding the biophysical environment. Right? Now, next one, of course, is modern man's, I'm sorry, it should be misconception, as have heard. Modern man's misconception of nature, by this time, the environment within us, himself. In other words, what happens is that in the modern period, we have man's misconception of himself. What it means that we don't know our own reality. So we're guessing who we are. It's trial, experimenting, trial and error, experiment to understand who we are. In the traditional way, as taught by the revelation in the Quran, for example, but by ourselves, by experimenting with ourselves. Yeah? So we study all the atoms of our body, the cells, as the smallest units of life, and so on. In other words, we want to understand ourselves purely by trying to understand our physical self. It is possible to go from an understanding of our physical self even to our true self, provided that we have a guidance. But by ourselves, we are led into so many errors, many errors. This, of course, when the Prophet Muhammad referred that, know yourself and you will know God. Know yourself. That knowing yourself doesn't, of course, most fundamentally referring to our nerves that says I, the nerves that is speaking the word I, that mentions the I, that is the central thing. But from the viewpoint of Islamic science, Islamic philosophy, even by knowing our physical self, rightly guided, it is possible to reach the center of our being, the spiritual heart, the self, our real self. Yeah, but because just like in the external cosmos, we have layers of reality. The same thing applies to us in our capacity as microcosm. Yeah. So this, in other words, this is another thing. So precisely because we don't know who we really are, so we have a misconception of ourselves, especially after the modern theory, the biological theory of evolution, provided by Darwin and other the neo-Darwinists and so on. So we only know about only half of ourselves, but not our whole self. That's what's going on. So we tend to look at ourselves as the more the most intelligent animal. All right. So we regard ourselves as the more intelligent animal. And what tradition has always mentioned, that there are two natures within us. And there is the lower nature, there is the higher nature. The higher nature is angelic. The lower nature is an animal. It's an animal nature. And when the animal nature is allowed to be, in a sense, to be expanded by means of intelligence, when our greed, our passion, is in a sense making use of our intelligence. This is basically what we are seeing. Yeah. So yes, we happen to be the animal that has the highest intelligence. But when when our higher nature is not controlling the lower nature, but on contrary, the other way around, then what is happening? We are releasing the forces of greed and other things that lends to exploitation of nature. So this is again the question of modern man's conception of nature, and the situation still is science does not provide the total picture of what we call human being. It's only partial, because the methods of modern science cannot capture the total reality, cannot grasp that total reality, and hence the argument that we need non-empirical means of understanding us, which Islamic tradition has emphasized. We have to refer to the Quran, the prophetic hadith, the spiritual methods of knowing ourselves. In order to know the whole reality of that we call human, that needs the help of many different methods of arriving at knowledge. So it's to summarize that, okay, I can discuss that. And finally, for this session now, that I would like to say is that precisely because of the misconception of nature, the external to us, misconception of nature in us, what we have is the rampant aggression against nature. Aggression. We go against the nature. What was it? Nature is balanced, has proportions, order, right? And in other words, as would emphasize about Islam, but this does not mean that we cannot use nature. The Quran itself encourages what they call this taskhir. The idea of taskhir is sakhar, which means that to make use of nature. But to make use there is not to as understood in the secular sense. In other words, how, and therefore the issue here is, how can we use nature in a way that we will not transgress against these natural laws, which bring about disastrous. How to live within the limits that are imposed by nature itself. And this is the concept of hudud. I'm telling you now, there are two types of hudud. One is hudud. Hudud means the limits. In the limits in human society, referring to limits of human behavior, there must be limits to human behavior beyond which we are going to cause trouble. All right? But there is another set of the kind of hudud, which is considering the laws of nature, the laws of God in nature. So laws of God are divided into two. One in human society, such as what Sharia is saying. That was the failure of man to observe the limits of those limits in nature and in human society, and that's the cause of all the problem. So thank you, Sister Safia. I just want to stop there, and then we can discuss now, because I didn't go into detail, but inshallah, I'm sure based on your questions, we'll be able to have a good discussion. So thank you.
MashaAllah, that was, wow. I don't know if anyone else is feeling this, but that was a very, that was a lot to
Too heavy?
Sorry, I think, okay, let's try to break this down to make it understandable for everyone, inshallah. I think those were thank you, by the way, for organizing in such a very clear, organized way, because I think it was easy to follow in that way. In terms of the concepts that need to be unpacked, I think the next 45 minutes, I think we'll spend our time to do that, inshallah. Okay, if you have any questions along the way, please just feel free to type your questions or like raise your hands and unmute. Inshallah, we'll attend to it as well. Yeah, so I think the first thing you mentioned was to understand our history and the roots of our crisis. And I think you touched a lot about like how we are misunderstanding the order. And what you said was actually interesting because in your book, you did say that there is, what do you call it? How we have over time sort of seen the environment as something non-sacred. So from a pre-modern conception of an understanding of nature where this divine was part of the equation, modern science has sort of removed the sacred and become more materialistic because of empiricism, which looks at touch, smell, sight. Like if you are able to measure it physically, then it exists. If not, anything unseen it doesn't exist. And so it makes sense how people now are becoming more materialistic as well, because we have lost all values in the unseen. And maybe that's why people are falling out of belief and falling out of faith. So okay, I think we have two people who would like to ask questions. Maybe I'll unmute Mr. Ahmad Salih. Okay. Are you able to unmute Mr. Ahmad?
Okay, shukran salam, Professor Osman. It's great to hear you again. Can you hear me?
Yes, please carry on.
Yeah. So I think during these last few years, COVID years, we became more acutely aware of even some more of the beauties of Islam. And I'm thinking of the life of the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, his earthing. The masjid didn't even have carpets, so there was earthing there. They slept on the floor, they ate on the floor. And there's so many healing properties in just that particular sunnah of the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. And so I think that to me, seeing nature as a form of healing, just being in the forest and the sunshine and breathing in the oxygen, and we look at the Prophet being connected to the mountains and caves and so on. And what has happened is the Western elite has really weaponized things and turned us against this natural way and being so much in tune with the divine through nature. So I just thought of that, but I love your comment on the Malaika and the angels. One of the first beings to really be expunged from the worldview, the cosmology of the Westerners. Because I think what has taken over is the psyche has replaced the ruh or the spiritual. And so I think getting back to that and being in tune with the Malaika, with our energy fields, with our magnetic fields, and especially these people that are playing God. So I really love that idea that mentioning and emphasizing that the angels were the first to go. And there's about 300 odd ayat of the Quran about the Malaika. I think the last quick thought that I have is I'm extremely worried about, as I said, the weaponization in the West with the chemtrails and the HARP programs and the CERN programs and constantly poisoning our environment and poisoning us against the environment. People don't even want to go into the sun, and they feel they are made to feel it is harmful. When there's ordinary with this ordinary snowstorm like we had in Michigan 2 days ago, then suddenly it's made as if it never happened before. So I think our people also need to know how these people are constantly wanting to play God and wanting to weaponize environment against us. And man arafa nafsa faqad arafa rabba. Knowing yourself, knowing your environment and your nature and everything around you is also really knowing your Lord. But shukran so much for all your insights, Dr. Bakar. Inshallah, we'll get hold of reread the book again. And Jazakallah for having us on today.
Thank you, Brother Ahmad. Yeah. Well, you mentioned first the question of the Prophet's Sunnah. I mean, that is the wisdom. So that is most important wisdom. The Prophet Sallallahu led a life which is in harmony with the environment. His Sunnah provides the norm. The example on how we should live if we want to have it's a healthy environment. Yeah. If we want to have a healthy environment, we want to see a healthy planet. If we want to see not a healthy planet, humanity needs to go back to that model of behavior. Remember the question of I was mentioning earlier. We has the problem of this aggression. Man's aggression against himself as well as against the external nature. But by looking at that behavior, that pattern of behavior, that was described, that was practiced by the Prophet. Then, of course, right now we live at a time when people want explanation. Just cannot just simply say this is the command, and either you follow it or not. But today, the younger people want explanations for why certain things are good. If they are good, why? If they are bad, why? We are more. The younger generation needs such kinds of approach. Yeah, in other words, to discover the wisdom of the Prophet Sunnah as far as the environment, the healthy environment is concerned. It's all there. It's all there. Yeah, but we have to point it out because so many of them, so many components of that unity which we call the Prophet's example, the Uswa Hasanah. Yeah. So there is something for a study by those concerned with healthy environment. So how many of us have been asking that? Yeah. We know the Prophet. We should follow the Prophet. Now, what is the wisdom of following the Prophet? What is the wisdom in relation to the environment? This in relation to the environment, very few of us deal with that. We talk about other things, yes, but not trying to connect this very profound relationship between the Prophet Sunnah and the environment. That is our duty. Okay, that's that, Brother Ahmad.
I think that was nicely summarized, Prof, because it reminds me of what I've heard by a scholar who said that the Prophet ﷺ has set out the journey. Everybody can get to some degree of his ﷺ's journey, and the path is there whether they want to take it or not. And the difference between pre-modern and modern people is that modern people, they had a path whether pre-modern people, they had a path whether they were Hindus, Christians, Buddhists, Muslims, even the Native Americans, Aboriginals. When they had their vision quests and all that, they had a way to bring young people into a spiritual world. And all these modern people have a spirit, modern people now are sort of entering this space where we're having, as Sheikh Hamza Yusuf would say, spiritual Alzheimer's. Alzheimer's, where we kind of forget our roots and where we come from, and they don't know why they're here. We don't know why they're created, but there is the path. There is a path, as you mentioned, and if you do not know where you're going, any road will take you where it is. And I think when you talk about the idea of when you talked about the lower self, the two natures of self, where there's the lower and the higher, I think there's this recognition also of the angelic self. Wait, sorry. No, wait, let me just go back a little. You said the modern man's misconception of nature, and you say how the modern man is a person who has embraced a worldview that is void of the sacred, where heaven and earth no longer exist, where earth only exists without the heaven. And I think the disregard for heaven kind of explains why now there is a focus on only the earth. And when you disregard heaven, it comes back to our purpose it comes back to our understanding of our purpose on this earth. Because for us Muslims, we have that belief that we have to believe in the day of judgment, Qiyamah will come, and there will be an afterlife. And that our life here on this earth is not our final abode, and that we have responsibilities here that we have to take care of. So I think that was, it kind of reminds me of like how we have to go back to our role models and our guides in the Islamic tradition, and to really look deeper into it. Yeah.
Okay. Yes. That's any other?
I think we have another question by Nuruddin. I will unmute.
Yes, Brother Nuruddin.
Yeah. Hello, Prof. Can you hear me, Prof?
Yes, I do. Please.
Yes. Thank you. Alhamdulillah. Nice to meet you again, Professor. I have 3 questions, Prof. I think I have read your book. It's very interesting. It's the second edition, in English, I think. My first question is, you differentiate between the Western awareness on environmental and Muslim awareness on environmentalism. You say in the book that Western consciousness about environmentalism built on empirism. Before they realize there's a problem in nature, they don't think it's important to think about nature. But for Muslim consciousness, it's different. Since he or she become a Muslim, he knows there's a sacred relation between he and the nature. Can you elaborate more, Prof? How this differentiate, make the how we can because of the two different concept of awareness, how can it relate to how we solve the problem of environmentalism? For example, if in the logic of empiricism, if we don't look how the climate change is actually appear, they don't think it's important. How can we transform, for example, from empiricism to worldview based consciousness? That's my first question. And my second question.
Can you one by one, rather? No, please.
Okay.
Don't not too many. One by one. All right. Your question basically you are referring to my book, where I stated that environmental consciousness in the history of Islam, Islamic civilization, originated was there right from the beginning. It was not something that you later came to know about, to learn after except after experiencing a certain, those kind of pollution and so on. In other words, only after experiencing the bad, the negative thing, then only you became conscious about the environment. That's what I mean. So that is based on history. It's not based on my own view. That's what happens in history. And why in Islam the environmental consciousness, the importance of the role of nature in your life, the importance of the role of the environment in our life. That is right from the beginning, because that comes out from the principle La ilaha illallah. There is no reality, there is no God other than God, and the environment is very important to us in our pursuit of knowledge about God. Islam teaches that in order to know Allah, there are two ways. One is through the Quran. You read the Quran. From the verses there, right, about nature and so on, and then pointing that many things about who God is, the qualities of God. But there's another book. There's another book, which is the book of nature. In other words, if we really are sincere, if our heart is clean, our mind is clean. So if we look at nature, contemplate on it, then that will lead us to Allah, because these are verses, these are ayatullah. The phenomena of the night and the day, the planets revolving around the sun, all other phenomena mentioned in the Quran, these are all ayat, these are all signs of Allah. So no other scripture speaks as much as the Quran about this book of nature. And in history, the West learned about this concept of the book of nature from Islam. Remember, Galileo, for example, talks about the book of nature, and how he faced opposition, strong opposition, persecution even from the church, from the official church, because the official step on the church is, if you want to know God, it's not through that book, it's through the Bible. So this question of approach. So maybe I can say three more now, because I mentioned the idea of the book. So the world of nature has always been looked upon in Islam as a book that can guide us to knowledge of God, of Allah. Not just Quran. But of course, the idea would be we study both books in the light of each other. We study the world of nature in the light of the Quran, and we study the Quran in the light of nature. The two should not be separated. This issue of unity, because they are the two books are dealing with the same reality. So it's the idea of this what I call this what's this high Yakzan by this philosopher, what's the philosopher? Ibn Yakzan. Sorry? Yes, Ibn Tufan. In other words, it is possible for someone to not to be born in this world, can find God himself. Yeah, can discover God. That was the story of Ibn Tufan, Ibn Yakzan, yeah, the son of the awake. So precisely because the understanding of La ilaha illallah depends on our knowledge about the natural world as well. So some Muslim theologians will take arguments about the existence of God from the world of nature. So that in other words, the consciousness about nature, the importance to our own consciousness, that is something that is deep-seated in Islamic teaching. So that's my thing. So that's why the word in Islam, the conception of nature, tabi'in, yeah, those who know Arabic, look at the root word of this nature, tabi'i. Yeah, says in terms of science, it is this tabi'i. In other words, it's natural natural science. But the root word taba'a, all right, is related to the word printing, related to the word book, stamping, and so on. It's as if that meaning that Allah has created the world nature as a book, which you can read, you can contemplate, you can analyze. So this idea of and of course it is sacred book. It is not profane. It is sacred book. It is the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Would a Muslim burn the Quran that we read? No, that we can't. That's not possible. I mean, we can't imagine that a Muslim, a sane Muslim, will burn the Quran. Right? But now Muslims are burning the Quran in symbolically in the sense that now you destroy the jungles, you erase, you shade the mountains. The mountains become barren. You pollute rivers. What are you doing? You are doing something against a sacred book, which you are not. Especially you have to preserve. Nobody wants to to place the Quran in the wrong place, to put it in properly, and so on. We take great care in our attitudes towards this sacred book Quran revealed to the Prophet. What, you don't care about the other book? You don't to observe. Yeah. So you destroy the other book of God. So in a sense, the Muslims are burning the other Quran. I think we should ponder. We should ponder on that. Yeah. While we respect the Quran that is revealed to the Prophet, but the open book of God, that's the other sacred book, we are destroying it. So there's no balance and harmony between that. Okay, yes.
Thank you so much for your question, Nuruddin. And thank you for your response, Prof. Osman, because I think you mentioned something really important. Just to catch everyone up to speed, like I think Prof. Usman mentioned the book written by Ibn Tufail. If you guys want to check it out, it's about a boy who goes out into the world and then discovers comes to the conclusion that there must be a creator. So I think the point was that just by looking at the signs, the ayats of the alam, you can kind of derive that there must be a superior being, there must be some sort of divine hand in all of this. And I think this goes back to the idea of how ayat in the Quran, like when you read ayat is defined as verses, translated as verses. But in the context of the Quran, I think it also refers to the signs of Him, Allah, and His greatness. And I think Allah describes the phenomena in the natural world ranging from the universe, its creation, the alternation between day and night, rainfall, and the life and growth of plants as signs that guide us back to Him. So I think if there's something we want to take away from today's session, perhaps it could be that we think about what the Prophet ﷺ, our beloved role model, used to do, and he would actually go to the cave of Hira and immerse in the natural atmosphere to contemplate on the realities of the world. And here we learn about how being in nature, a peaceful retreat, helps us in understanding Him. And yeah, so I think also we notice that when, I don't know if you experience nature, I'm sure everyone has been to nature, and when you step into that space, we feel a certain calmness or a certain ease. And I think it's because the sister shared how we are in a way being invited into this space of remembrance, because every living creature, every creation is literally in remembrance of Allah. It's just that we don't understand perhaps the way they zikr. Maybe the plants zikr a different way, the sea, the animals. And if we stop to think more about how other creations sort of keep that relationship with Allah, maybe we can be inspired to also be in remembrance. And I think the goal here is to be God conscious at the end of the day. And once we fulfill that relationship or achieve that relationship with Allah, I think things will start making more sense to us and our lives will be more, I don't know, whole, complete, if we could say that.
Yes,
Professor.
okay. No,
but we have some questions. We have some questions in the comment section. Okay, there's a question about, there are now, by Big Chihen, there are now 8 billion people on this planet Earth. Can you comment on a bit regarding the role of interfaith communication in order for the environmental wisdom be shared to as many as possible? And I think this is a good question because especially in Malaysia and Singapore, where we have like multi-religious communities, there's sometimes this we live in a society with different underlying beliefs. So how do we take collective action when there is differences in belief systems? Yeah.
Can you repeat the question by Brother Beck?
Okay. He said that, can you comment a bit regarding the role of interfaith communication in order for the environmental wisdom be shared to as many as possible?
Thank you. Yes, it's a very nice question, and it goes right to the heart of the matter, in a sense, about the universality of nature. In other words, whereas we have many scriptures, the Buddhist scripture, the Hindu, the Muslim, Christian, and so on. So, instead there are many such books, but there is only one book of nature that speaks a universal language to humanity, because that world has already existed well before even the first man was created, existed, namely Prophet Adam alayhi salam. I mean, the book of nature is already there. It's a beautiful garden. It is the earthly garden, the earthly paradise. Yeah? This is, I say, it's interesting because despite humanity having different religious scriptures, but when it comes to our experience with nature, is one and the same. Only that we may express that in different through different languages. But if we analyze carefully, underlying those different expressions of our experience of nature, there's in reality there's only one experience, and therefore the question of interfaith around issues of environment can be very, 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 very beneficial, and it's something in a sense we can understand each other very well. Yeah, whether it's a question of basically what each natural phenomena that we experience means to us. Yeah, we see the same sun rising in the west. We see the full moon. We see the phenomena of the night. That is universal language. That is universal language that we should all experience. If we go into the virgin jungle, which is very, very, very rare now, I mean, we share the same experience. That's why mystics, for example, when they write their poems, they express the same sense of appreciation of the awe of nature, the wonders of nature, that the experience of an environment. As I said, the only difference is that we are using different words in our own language, but the reality that we are describing is goes to the bottom of the heart that we can share. So in our present context, it is good to bring together the people of different faiths by bringing in what is called environmental problems. It's quite different when you want to invite let's say, want to discuss between different faiths on say the societal values. Societal values. It's more difficult because we have different perspectives of looking at values. What is we may even differ on the question of good and evil, the question of the priorities and so on. But not in the case of the environment. The environment is in fact is the only issue on which we can conquer without really dividing ourselves along religious lines. So the concern for the natural environment will bring us together in a more marked way. Yeah. So that is my response. Yeah. In other words, we can be together. We can be together by discussing our common environmental problems.
Right. So perhaps now it's just that there are many different understanding, and the first step to even begin collective work is to make sure everybody is on the same page and start the conversation going among different faiths and communities. We have another question by Muhammad Shazani Masri. I will ask you to unmute.
Hello, Assalamualaikum, Prof. And thank you, Safia. Okay, I think I just want to further relate on the matter of the interreligious dialogue, because in your book, Prof, you also mentioned about Laudato Si and dialogue between Professor Said Hussein Nasr and the Pope that led to the decree, the Catholic decree, something to do with the environmental protection. And I think it's also very important because I also wrote a review on that, is somehow forming a new frontier between the Catholic Church and Islam in a very general scale. And also, secondly, the matter of the sapientia, the idea that the anthropos, being human, should be reviewed in light of the environment, because I think we also face not only the question of pollution, we also climate change and whatnot, but we are also looking at the very nature of what is being human itself. For instance, the idea that we are from ape, for instance, and at the same time, there is a very long-standing idea of wisdom that we are not, from below, but rather from above. So I guess this is the part where I think the environment can also reflect with regards to the sapiential when we think in terms of what we as human, because I think it also influences major fields such as anthropology, you see, because we are very influenced by modern and postmodern thinkers. So the book can provide at least a teaser to such inquiry, like inquiring the nature of the anthropos itself, the human. Thank you.
Well, Brother Shazani, I mean, we have to understand that reality of nature and the world, the cosmos, admits of various levels. So we can start from the lowest level of concern with the environment to the highest level of concern. In other words, there can be many different levels of interfaith dialogue going on the issue of the environment. We can talk about the problem, the common problems that we have, about how we use our natural resources. This is the lowest level, in the sense that we are talking about the need to protect the environment as a source of the is as a source of materials, the resources for us, especially that can sustain us in the future. And that's basically what is the most common one that we have right now. Concern with the environment at that level, at the level of reality, namely this biophysical level. Now you're referring to Saint Nasser and the Pope Francis, all right? They were talking at a different level, a spiritual level, right? But some human beings are not concerned with spiritual things, and therefore they do not want to be part of that dialogue on the spiritual significance of nature. Yeah? Because nature is of significance to human beings at different levels. So the mystics, for example, the Sufis and the Buddhist mystics and the Christian mystics, when they talk about level, they can talk about their concern. In others, the environmental consciousness at much higher level. But then at that level, it becomes a concern of a small minority. So the level will determine, in a sense, how many people get involved. But for us today, I think most of the people of different faiths now meeting, discussing each other. It's very to save the planet Earth. The concern with that save, of course, is climate change. Yeah. So that is it is the lowest in the sense of the in terms of the ontological level, but it is of profound importance because it concerns the future of planet Earth, the quality of life. That concerns everybody. So people can talk about that. Yeah? But to understand now, that's it, among philosophers. Yeah? I've attended program. We have dialogues among philosophers, for example, on the meaning and significance of the world of nature, as far as philosophy is concerned. Kind of issue, only a smaller number of people find the interest to that. One more I have to bring in the question of the sacred. In other words, it is for the certain groups of people, but all are important. Okay, and then Sabia.
Okay, thank you so much for your question, Mohammed, and for your response as well. I think I'm very conscious about the time. It's almost 9:30, so unfortunately we will not be able to take any more questions. Perhaps we'll just wrap it up. But I think, Hilmi, do you think we can record these questions and then get it answered in the next sessions or something? Because this is going to, the sessions will recur for like for this series at least. Yeah, maybe we can look into it and get back to you. But yeah, I think just to wrap up the session, there's some comments about, if COVID scam was a eugenics depopulation problem and all that. There is a lot of fake news out there. There's a lot of how do we know what is real, what is not? How do we differentiate sound news, what's real and what's not, basically? And I think Obama actually said we might be in an epistemological crisis where we don't know how to differentiate truth from falsehood. So I pray that we are protected from that, being able to tell truth from falsehood, falsehood from truth. And I think the first step, Prof, how do we combat? How do we safeguard ourselves from being prey to this crisis where we don't even know what's real and what's not?
Yes, there are, guided by the Islamic tradition, right? Our first source of reference is always the Quran. We also refer to the Quran because one of the names of the Quran is Al-Furqan, which is the name of one chapter of the Quran, which means the criterion, The criterion of what? The criterion between right and wrong, between truth and error, truth and falsehood. Because in order to have the correct answer, the best answer to the question, we must be very, very objective. Yeah? So the most objective person will be able to come up with this answer, how to answer that question. And we know, of course, Allah is the most objective. Yeah? Allah is the most objective, the perfect. In a sense, He is not susceptible to the likelihood of error and false. No, I mean his judgment is perfect. So, and therefore we human beings, who are not perfect, still refer to many of the things, many of the issues that we are facing in this world are in the Quran. So the Quran tells us what is true. But there are smaller issues, other issues which are not mentioned in the Quran. This is where we have to use our reason. For our own reason. God has given us intellect, reason, understanding to distinguish. But of course, the ability of our intellect, reason to come up with the answer, that depends on how healthy it is. This is the problem. Yes, in principle, everyone has intellect, reason, but for most part, in many cases, they are not healthy. What was the meaning not healthy? Not healthy mind, not intellect, which means that there are obstacles. There are, in other words, we are not able to exercise the right kind of thinking, right thinking to enable us to answer that question: is this true or false? So Islam, for example, a religion in general, provides the means how to come, in a sense, to have an intellect reason that is healthy. This was emphasized by Muslim scholars. My favorite scholar, Farabi, Al-Ghazali, for example. The state of our mind, the state of health of our mind, of our intellect, that will determine whether or not we were able to come up with an objective answer to the question that we pose, and therefore, but this has something to do with our way of life, our lifestyle. Yeah. So why is it that some people have mental problems, others are not? It's something to do with healthy lifestyle. And why did God send down the Sharia? Is to enable us to live a healthy lifestyle. So I think that's important to remember. Therefore, it's not simple thing. Yeah? In other words, it depends on a number of factors.
Thank you so much, Prof. Yeah, I think if anything, that's a reminder for us to stop, pause, and then also rethink about our lifestyles and what we are doing with our lives. Alhamdulillah, I think it has been like an amazing first session. Thank you so much for your sharing. Perhaps, we should.
So we'll decide later when the next discussion is this time.
Yes, and I will update in the learning management platform as well. And yeah, so keep in the loop. I'll just share the link if you wanna. Hang on. Okay, I think there will be a feedback form shared by Hilmi. Hilmi, are you there?
Yes, Sophia. Yeah, I will send to the chat.
Okay. If you are interested to also keep up, I know I'm very pleased to actually find out that the audience is made up of like many people. It's quite heartening to see and encouraging to see that there are many people across the region, not only in Singapore and Malaysia, but also from Qatar. And I think people are trying to find also how to access your book, Prof. I think
Yes.
I know you can get you can order from Wardah also maybe, but
Yes.
Wardah bookstore.
Is he referring to my book on the
yes.
environmentalism? Is that? Are you referring to that book?
Yes.
I mean,
I think he's based in Qatar.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, those who want to buy to get the books, please inform me.
Maybe Hilmi, do you think
Prof,
this?
maybe they can inform us. Then after that, we'll get the authors and get back to you lah.
Yes. Okay.
You can do that through the learning management platform, right?
Yes, we can do that, and we will send also an email to everyone regarding this, because I think everybody like asking about the book.
I suggest that Sister Safia for in between now and our next year. So based on our discussion today, based on my introduction, I suggest that now why not everyone come up with some questions that after thinking, reflecting, so that I may touch some of them in the next, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I think we can frame the next session and then like split it up. Yeah. Okay. So Alhamdulillah. Yes, recording will be available. Recording will be available. And if you're in Singapore and you wanna feel like you wanna do something with all this knowledge that you've been listening to and actually put it into practical means, you can check out Fitri. We've been doing work as well, and we're trying to build a community in Singapore. This is the link. You can check out the work that we've been doing. Even if you're overseas also, feel free to just tap on it and follow us. We will also keep you updated on the future sessions for this. Yeah. I think maybe we can have a closing dua from you, Prof.
Yeah.
A closing dua. Closing dua. Would you like to do a closing dua?
Oh, yes. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار وقنا عذاب النار وقنا عذاب النار. Ya Allah, give us guidance for us, our family and our friends and the whole of the Muslim Ummah. We pray for the best, Ya Allah. Ya Allah, let's protect وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون والسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين. تقبل الله منا. Good. Okay, thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you, Prof. Thank you, everyone, for being here tonight. Have a wonderful weekend and hope to see you in the next session, inshallah.
Yes, for those of you who got the feedback, I've included one more question for you to write your questions. This will be very interactive sessions, and the future sessions will depend on your feedback and on your questions that you post. So please help us by sharing your thoughts and your feedback, and we can curate the sessions in the future, including perhaps trails to Malaysia to visit Prof maybe, and also in Singapore. And I see people from Indonesia as well. So inshallah, we can arrange something of that sort to immerse ourselves in this whole nature that we've just discussed tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. Is it? I think it's still recording, is it?
Yeah, it is. It's fine. It's okay. We can cut later on. But I think people are thanking Prof for letting Jazakumullah khairan, Prof. Yeah. So is Prof Osman still here?
his video is off, but do we need to discuss?
Yes.
Okay.
Sure. Okay, let's wait for everyone to leave. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Yes, to Brother Nurdin. And I see Sister Nur Hazlin. Okay. See you again, inshallah. Assalamualaikum.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.